Hey, sports fans, it's Stuart Weir, the good looking guy on top with the nice blue shirt and the earphones. I'm Larry Eder, the scruffy guy at the bottom. We're talking across the pond. I'm in the US and Stuart's in another country. And this is Athletics Chat number 107, our third season. Can you believe it? Stuart, great to see you.
Yeah, good.
You had a lovely vacation?
I did. I was in an island called Corsica in the Mediterranean.
Oh, wow. Now, is that where Napoleon's buried, or he was a prisoner there or
Um,
something?
no, oh, I forgot his name. It's got, I don't think Napoleon was particularly there. Christopher Columbus, though, lived
Oh,
there
I've
at
heard of
one
him.
stage.
Yeah. 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 The guy
Yeah,
that
the man who made the terrible discovery of finding America and telling other people about it.
yeah, he did. He did. And now they've taken his name off the day in the US and they're now calling it Indigenous People Day. So, you know,
Well, there you are. There you
it's
are.
the changes in history, the vagaries of history.
Mm,
So,
mm.
but yeah, I was in Portugal for a couple of weeks and it was nice to get a little bit of a break. And we are back home now and we're enjoying the fall. The leaves are starting to change, and we had our first frost today, so it keeps it exciting. But
Well, I'm in Oxford, England, and today was warmer than the average for July. So we're having a little bit of a late Indian summer, as we sometimes call it.
wow, that's
No
cool.
frost here.
No frost there. So we are in the middle of marathon season. We had Berlin 2 weeks ago. We have Chicago yesterday. We have New York in a few weeks. And in Berlin, we had the one and only Eliud Kipchoge running a 2:02:42, his fifth win in Berlin.
Mm.
And then we had Tigges Tasifa blowing people's minds, running a 2:11:53, breaking the world's record, which was formerly 2:14:08, which we were freaked out about. And she was in a pair of a new Adidas racing shoe that was offered to consumers the next day for $488.75. That's 400 pounds sterling and just under that, no, about 350 pounds sterling and about 400 euros. And it sold out across the world. And people were just kind of mind boggled. And then someone sent me an article about how, if you look at the way TG's Asifa has developed from an 800-meter runner to a 10,000-meter runner, the 211 is well within her, constraints. And I'm kind of going, okay, then I guess I'm just getting too old. And then, because 211:53 would have put her number 13 on the US men's list. That's how fast it is. And then we have Chicago yesterday and a new men's world record, first time in the US since 1999 in old Khalid Kanuchi with his 205:42. And this time it was Kelvin Kiptum, a 23-year-old, in his third marathon, and he runs 2:00:35. And when I asked him afterwards, did you have discomfort over the last 7 or 8 kilometers? He goes, I didn't have any discomfort. And that was followed up by Jonathan Galt asking him 3 times and someone else. And yeah, he said he wasn't in pain at all. And then he was asked, when did you know you could break the world record? And he said at 5K, which was mind boggling. And then we had the one and only Safan Hassan, who
Yeah.
blew our minds in Budapest. And, the thing about Budapest, Stuart, we've talked about that before. She fell in the 10. She got back up and she was like, hey, it happens. And then she runs the 1,500 the next day and the 5,000. And then she comes and runs in her second marathon, a 2:13:44. And the
I've
interview with
heard
her
that.
was great. Good.
I was going to say, I've heard she's not very good at throwing the javelin.
Yeah.
We've
I
actually found
after,
something that she's not
yeah.
good at because she seems to be able to do anything from 1,500 to the marathon
Wow.
and to be able to switch from one to the other, to be able to take on two races in the same day, to be able to take on two distance races, in a very short time. I mean, I saw a ridiculous quote from her when somebody said to her, "Can you really do a marathon so quickly after your track season?" She said, "It's okay, I had a few days off."
Well, there's the rumor that someone saw her working out a second time last night in Chicago after
Mm-hmm.
the marathon. I hope she's giving herself a little break because she deserves it. But she is
Mm-hmm.
a incredibly talented athlete.
Mm-hmm.
She has a wonderful sense of humor. It was
Mm-hmm.
really interesting. They were finishing the presser. Carrie Pinkowski, the race director, had come up and talked about how great it was. And Kelvin took another question from me, and Safan directed her response because I was filming, and she wanted to thank everybody on the course for cheering her on and how
Mm-hmm.
incredible Chicago had been, and that she hopes
Mm-hmm.
to come back. Very sweet, very thoughtful, and just one of our photographers, Kevin Morris, the day before I asked him, I said, anything special you've seen? And he goes, Larry, I can't believe Safan Hassan. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, I've never seen someone so happy and so relaxed who's going to run a world-class marathon the next day. And I saw her walking around the lobby 5 or 6
Mm-hmm.
times on Saturday afternoon and evening. Yeah, she's just an incredible athlete, a great
Mm-hmm.
story. And it's really fun to see her enjoying herself, you know.
Yeah.
Of all the world records we saw this summer, do you have a favorite?
Well, I could narrow it down to Faith Kipyegon,
Okay.
but then I saw her run. You lose count. I think it was three at Diamond League, and you know I did this interview with her in Florence and asked her the world record, and she said, "I think it will happen sometime, but definitely not tomorrow." So she goes out the next day and breaks the world record. And she said she honestly didn't think it was going to happen. She wasn't just playing games.
Wow.
That she just didn't. She thought she could do it, but she wasn't ready so early in the season. And boom, she was out and got it. And then what was it? 10 days later, she goes to Paris and breaks the 5,000. Oh, that's going already.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, but again, interestingly, he did show she was human by being beaten in the road mile.
Yeah, I was kind of
With
surprised
yeah,
by that, but that was it was interesting. It just tells you the level of competition there.
yeah,
And you know, it all I've heard, a couple friends went to the World Road Champs and they really liked it. They said they really did a
mm-hmm,
nice job. And it sounds like it's something that Seb wants to do more of these one-day world championship kind of ideas
mm-hmm,
or a
yeah,
short time period
mm-hmm,
because it's less of an investment, but also can
mm-hmm.
showcase the sport, you know.
Well,
And uh,
in Brussels, no, in Zurich rather, Seth did a press conference, and there weren't many people at it. And I asked him, I said to him, I thought that Budapest had been really good, except for the marathon, that I was concerned the number of athletes who were going through the mixed on wheelchairs and so on. His instant reaction was to say, well, actually, there were more dropouts in 2017 in London than there were in Budapest. But he then actually went on to say, we may have to think about taking the marathon world championship out of the track world championship. Because if we're going to go to places like Qatar and places like Budapest, where it was unceasingly hot, that it's unfair on the marathon runners. So, in a way, if he does that and he puts it into the road race championship in a way, that makes that even bigger.
yeah, well, it was. I got some time with him prior to the World Champs in Budapest. We had a call in, and then he had the one with the LOC. At the one with the LOC, I asked him about another world champs in the U.S. After Eugene, and he was pretty direct. He said that he's open to a world champs in North America again, but it must be on the East Coast because they need the TV revenue. Very, very direct. And then he said to us at Eugene, because it was Jerry Longman from New York Times, a couple from the Sahi Shimboom, AFP, Jeff Benjamin, and myself. And so we had about 45 minutes with him. And his big thing was, hey, look, this World Champs was the first one that I really had some direction on. This is the way we're going to go in the future. And I got that. But he also said this thing, and I wanted to run this by you. He said that our season is too short to get big sponsors. He said from, really April to September. And I'm kind of going, okay, I know many of the athletes. You take a Noah Lyles, who started competing in January, and competed until September, and you got distance kids who have done that because they've gone through the end of cross country. They did, and there's many. How many think about it? Jessica Hall is the one that comes up right away. World Cross, then outdoor season, then the World Champs, then Riga, and so you kind of go, wow, can we have too much of a good thing?
Well, yeah, but he said exactly the same thing in Zurich. But I mean, if you compare soccer in the UK and in Europe is an 11-month season.
Okay.
And if you take different events from the distance, if you take a sprinter or a field eventer, some of them choose not to do an indoor season, which means they effectively start competing seriously in June and may finish at the end of August. I think that's his point, that just to have 3 months, and I mean, obviously, I don't know the American scene that well, but at the moment, there's a Rugby World Cup which lasts for 6 weeks, and a Cricket World Cup which lasts for the same amount of time on my television day after day after day. And I think he's probably thinking if you take any of those three sports, they're on television so much more. I mean, the World Championship was blanket coverage in the UK, but that's probably the only event. Diamond League, you're getting a 2-hour program, often on a slightly obscure channel. If he's saying, we need more income, we need more exposure, I can understand his point about using a longer season.
Yeah.
But again, winter training is so important for athletes, more so, I would say, than any of the other sports I talked about. The preseason for a soccer player is about 2 to 3 weeks, whereas, athletes talk about doing their winter training, starting back in October. And even if you're going to do an indoor, it's 4 months before you're thinking of competing. Yeah. So I think we also have to recognize the difference in the sports and the difference in the demand on the body.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense.
I don't know. It's one of the things that Seth said in Zurich, again, repeating the point you just made, that while he has been president for at least 2 previous world championships, he inherited them from a predecessor. And he said that Budapest was the first one that he had been involved in all the way through. And he said that he had said to the organizing committee in Budapest, I can forgive most things, but I cannot forgive empty seats. So we've got to have the tickets at a price that people can buy them. We've got to have transport that gets people to the stadium in a convenient way. And if I may say so, Oregon failed both those with the previous World Championship.
Yeah.
Tickets were expensive and getting there was not easy.
Yeah. No.
And there were an awful lot of empty seats.
No, there was a lot of our European friends who did not go to the Worlds. And they just, and when I saw them in Budapest, they just said, yeah, it was just way too expensive. We couldn't pull it off, and it was the same thing with the Prefontaine. I think there were probably, well, the tent was full, but it's mostly photographers and content development people. I'm having Jonathan Galt at Let's Run did a piece recently, very well done, about the difference between journalists and content developers. And I know in the US, I don't know how it is at the British meets because I haven't been there for a few years. In the US, the preponderance of people are content developers. They're really not there to ask pertinent questions. Many times it seems that there's just two or three people there asking questions about what's really happening with the athletes and where they're going to go, not just about, what's their favorite color and what do they do during their off time. And those things all have a place. But I also think that we have serious readers and they want us to take our athletes seriously and with respect. And it doesn't mean trashing them or coming after them, but asking the pertinent question is really important. In Chicago yesterday, there was Jonathan Galt from Let's Run. There was Dave and Jane Monty from Race Results Weekly. There was myself. There was Sarah from Runner's World. There were a couple freelancers from FlowTrack, and there was a ton of photographers. And then there was some local media. But the questions in the pressers were asked by three of us. And it's just, it's interesting,
Jason Henderson also wrote a piece on that very topic. And he actually talked about some of the pressers in Budapest where content developers would actually make a speech to the athlete rather than asking a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it was interesting because they didn't do medal pressers for every event like they used to do up until 2019. And when I sat down in the first presser after what had been after the 200 that I was at, I was told I was allowed one question per athlete. And I've never had that one before, And then all of a sudden, a couple people just belted out questions. And so then they opened it up. But it's very interesting how they're limiting those events. I thought that British athletics was very good about doing the events for your folks and your access to it. USATF didn't do that. USATF just didn't do it. They were so busy doing their own content, which they don't even send to us. So when I asked them where stuff is, you can find it on our site. We didn't want to get it, mess up your email. And I'm just kind of like going, what are you talking about? But this is how the right now, the way that they're focused is content developers. And it's just very strange. And, the content room, do you understand that concept, what they're doing at these events where they do this content room? And I didn't know what the difference is for me going in there and doing a long interview with somebody and doing some showy thing. I don't understand it. So I think what I'm going to do in the future is just set up some long interviews in there, and it'll be comfortable seats, and I can ask people questions, although we've got about 25 or 30 short interviews still from Budapest we're posting, and people seem to love it.
But one of the things that me, from a British point of view, is that there are now among the national press very few specialist track and field writers.
Yeah.
You've got somebody like Sean Ingle, who's brilliant, but he'll be doing tennis one week, athletics the next. He was at the Ryder Cup golf.
Wow.
So you don't build up the expertise in one sport. And again, I can thinking of the people who were in Budapest national papers. None of them would be people who this week are writing an athletic story. They'll all have moved on to a different sport.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was a great example of there was a briefing we got with Jasmine Sawyer, and one of the people there who's not an athletic background had picked up that her mother had been a county chief police officer, and he wanted to make the story. And what was my turn to ask? I asked her about how she'd overcome the problems she'd had with her runner. And it was just a completely different press conference that I would say she was much more relaxed talking to me about what she thought she'd been coming in to talk about
Yeah.
rather than her family background.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
But
you
again,
see,
I understand the situation that newspaper person thought, well, I never get anything in just a bit longer, so I've got to find some kind of interesting angle.
yeah, yeah, we would see that for every one of the U.S. Olympic trials, and I just remember being with James Dunaway and about from '96 on, and in the U.S., the Olympic specialist maybe saw one track meet before they came to the Olympic trials, and in the U.S., what they tended to ask questions about was drugs because it was the easiest thing to stay up on. And it got to be really, I understood their concern, but I also felt that the athletes lost out in that this was their chance to tell their story and to shine. And that's what I thought the medal pressers were about. We in 16 and 17, we recorded many of those, and people still download those. And then the ones we did in 19, I mean, my son Adam sat through every metal presser in Doha, and they were great because there was a few of us in there asking questions, and a lot of times I'd get a question at least with each one of the athletes, which was great, and let them tell their story, and that's what they wanted,
Yeah,
and we got to hear
yeah.
some classic, you know,
Mm-hmm.
pieces,
Mm-hmm.
and World Athletics isn't doing that anymore. It's and I know things have to change. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
thought that the setup in Budapest was one of the best that we've had, with the
Yeah,
exception of the 126 stairs tour, you know. Uh,
indeed, indeed.
but it did build up my heart, so I was, very happy with that. And the few stairs I had at other places the rest of the summer were just paled in comparison. So, I
Yeah.
just say,
Mm-hmm.
well, it's not Budapest, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the
But the amazing thing is that if you were to go back to Budapest in a month or two, where we sat will no longer exist.
yes, that's what is blowing my mind as well. The
Mm.
whole idea of a temporary stadium.
Yeah.
And
Just to explain to the listeners, the it was a two-story stadium, new stadium, but they reckon they will not need for track and field such a big capacity again. So they built the upper story in a temporary format so they could just take it off and leave the the lower story only. So the
wow,
stadium will have a capacity of about 15,000.
yeah, yeah, and they're bidding for the European champs, and
And I believe that SEP actually encouraged them to bid for the Olympics.
wow, wow. Well, you think about it, in a country such as Hungary,
Mm,
where you can get so much done because it's almost a one party system. It was hugely successful. The
mm,
and you think about London, you think about Budapest, you think
mm,
about virtually every world champs we've had in Europe, and the level of
yeah,
interest has
yeah,
been very, very high.
yeah.
So the US one, which had so much promise,
Mm.
It just doesn't seem that there's enough understanding or appreciation of the complexity of what they've taken on. World Championships
Yeah,
is a pretty difficult thing to do. Perhaps that's it. I don't
yeah,
know, but I do know that, and it was interesting too. The Prefontaine was a tremendous event, great crowds, incredible performances. But from my European friends who were there and who observed it, they thought it was pretty typical American over the top. And and I asked them what they meant, and they said, well, Nike athletes won most of the races, and they had these uniforms that modeled after the university colors, which Americans got, but Europeans didn't understand at all.
mm,
Now, the orange and the green and yellow was
mm,
beautiful colors and everything like that, but a lot of people thought it was too much. And I think that's just it's an American thing sometimes,
yeah,
and it's just not appreciated. And it's one of those things we've got to figure out if we're really going to have this as a world sport, and the
mm,
U.S. needs to recognize that. So it just
yeah.
it's some little things. So our next big, you're not going to go anywhere till indoor season, correct?
That's correct.
Good, good. Well, I'm hoping to see you in Birmingham and then come over for Glasgow for the
Yeah,
World Indoors, which should be a lot of
yeah,
fun. And
yeah.
Glasgow's a fun city.
Mm.
And
And I mean,
what?
they did the European indoors, so they know how to do it.
Yes, they do. That was I had to watch that from over here, unfortunately,
Mm.
but that was a tremendous event. Talk to me about our friend Laura Muir. How would you describe her season?
Well, obviously, he had a change of coach, which he hadn't planned to have, and that inevitably made life a little bit difficult. I mean, she didn't get a medal at the World Championship when she might have done, but actually, I spoke to her afterwards, and she said that she thought she had done the best she could. The way the race panned out didn't really suit her. She thought if there had been a faster race, she would probably have done better. But the way it went, that she was right in the mix with 200 to go, and then her legs just weren't there as she put it. But then, of course, the following two weeks, she went to Zurich and Brussels, winning an 800 and a 1500 in really very good time
Mhm.
and absolutely dominating the race. And in Zurich, beating athletes who had beaten her in Budapest. She said that she's very happy with her coaching arrangements at the moment. And she feels that this season has left her in a really good place to prepare for Paris.
What about Gemma Riki's season?
Again, I mean, I think that Gemma, having come fourth in the Tokyo Olympics, and only fourth because Raven Rogers produced that amazing burst to gain the medal. Gemma has been ill for a lot of the time since, and she's just been had struggles. And she only this year, I think, has she been really fit. And I just thought that she looked an athlete on the up. And so I would expect to see her running really well next year. I mean, the problem is that the 800 is probably as competitive a race as there is in the
Yeah,
sport.
yeah,
With Apping Moo, uh, Keely Hutchinson, Mary Mora, and Raven Rogers didn't have a brilliant season. I.G. Wilson similarly, but those two are very fine athletes. So I wouldn't want to put my life savings on who's going to be in the medals and in which order for Paris. I think that's a very open space. But I mean, Gemma seems to be enjoying her new craft training setup with John Biggs, and I would expect to see her really having a good season.
What's your thoughts on Keely Hodgkinson this year?
In a way, um, she went into the season thinking it was going to be a battle with Upping, but then of course Upping didn't run very much.
Yeah,
And Mary Mora is a fascinating athlete. You
yeah,
know, in the Commonwealth Games, he won the 800 last year by running the first lap as if he was running a 500 or a 600, but then going from first place to eighth and then coming back to first again. You know, if you were actually wanting to coach an athlete and tell them how not to run the 800, it was
yeah,
exactly like that. But it
yeah.
worked for her. And, I just think she seems to be a supremely talented athlete, as is Keely. So, I mean, if you had those three in the medal in Paris, I would not be remotely surprised. And I would have no idea which order would have come. And I
Yeah,
think it could be any order.
yeah.
I mean,
The
I saw Keely run what was her first 800 of the year in Paris and run a PR. I mean, even she was surprised. But she had said the previous day, she'd been asked at the prepper, what are you going to do tomorrow? And she said, I have honestly no idea. So it's my first race of the season. We'll just have to see. And then after she said, well, I thought I could run well, but I wasn't expecting that.
I thought a thing had a very curious season. She
So,
didn't seem real happy. Finally, after the Prefontaine, where they had a tremendous race, her and Keely, she seemed to be more of herself. But I think that she was just having that time when she didn't really know if she liked what she was doing, you know? And
yeah.
I think that's what's going on with Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone. I hope her injury isn't bad. But I also think that what she's done is she's given Femke Bull the time to catch up a little bit.
Yeah.
And Femke had a very strange Worlds where she collapsed at the end of that mixed relay, running
Yeah.
about a 48 point,
Yeah.
comes back, wins the hurdles,
Mm-hmm.
and then has that brilliant anchor on the 4 by
Yeah.
4
Yeah.
And you have to give it to her. And then the way she ran the rest of her season, finishing under
Mm-hmm.
52, I
Mm-hmm.
think that she and Sydney could be one of the huge stories next year.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be interesting to see. What are your thoughts on that?
If you look at Femke and Sydney, I have seen Sydney run in the Rio Olympics, in the Doha World Championships, in the Tokyo Olympics. I have probably seen Femke Ball run 40 times,
Yeah,
and that's the difference. I mean, Femke went to the European teams and ran a 400 flat and then went home. And she just said to me, oh, I just thought I needed to run a flat 400. And this one, and I love running to my 10th grade. I'm not saying to do the relays because I need to be back in training. But I mean, just the fact that she made the effort to
yeah,
go to the meet, to run that race. But athlete-coach relationships are very complicated. But I mean, I was amazed when Sydney was asked in Paris, what event are you running in the World Championships this year? And her answer, which I think was an honest answer, she said, I don't know, that's coach's decision.
yeah, yeah,
But I sense that Femke Ball much more controlled the key ball.
yeah. No, it's a very interesting to see how athletes are developing and how the different approaches that people take. And I'm very, very curious about this next year. You know, we've had now 2019, nothing in 2020, Olympics 21, World Champs 22, World Champs 23. We're going to have an Olympics in 24 and a World Champs in 25. And then who knows what Seb's coming up with in 26. There's a suggestion of a whole new format. And I don't know if people are going to be happy with it or not, but we have no idea kind of what's going to come up. But it's a long, great season ahead of us, and I think that we'll have more things to discuss next week in Athletics Chat 108. But Stuart, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you again for your time. Glad you're back from vacation, my friend.
Good. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, sports fans, this is Athletics Chat 107. We're in our third season. Thank you for following us today. And we will talk with you again next week on Run Blog Run. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder here. This is the epilogue of Athletics Chat 107. Stuart and I just got back from vacation. He was in Corsica. I was in Portugal. As you can see, we're back in the Laren Hall. And so today we talked about the world records, the women's world record in Berlin, the men's world record in Chicago yesterday. We talked about the Safan Hassan and Kelvin Kiptum. We talked about the world records this season and what we enjoyed. We spent a little time on some of the British athletes, Laura Muir, Shamariki, Keely Hodgkinson, and then we talked about Athing Mu, and our friend Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone and Femke Bull. And we talked about, just started to tease on Paris 2024, but we've got a lot of time for that. I've got to say, the Chicago Marathon, and this is the 45th, and I believe I've been to 33 or 34. I'll have to go back and look in my diary. This was the best one I've seen since 1999, way back with Khalid Kanuchi, which was a lot of fun to watch Khalid run. Khalid ran his debut in Chicago. He ran world record there and came close to the world record as well. A tremendous athlete. Kelvin Kiptum is one of the most talented athletes I've ever seen. And Carrie Pinkowski talked about being in London, and he and his wife were out on the course cheering on their daughter, and he saw Kiptum go by him, and he told his wife, I got to have that athlete for Chicago. And so Carrie went after him, and he got him. And it was a tremendous race. I'm trying to rack my brain to think about an athlete who I've seen run like that before, and I haven't. A 4:22 mile, I thought that was going to break it up, but that wasn't enough. Then he ran a 4:18 mile in mile 22. Then he ran a 4:24 mile. His last two 5Ks were 13:51 and 14:01, so a 27:52 over the last 10K. When most people slow down, he was asked innumerable times, were you tired? When did you feel tired? And he said, I didn't feel tired. And he really enjoyed the race. He's a tremendous athlete and a tremendous competitor. Can he break 2 hours? Of course he can. But what's going to be interesting to see, and world records are, a part of the sport, maybe too much of our sport, is how he does in championship events. Or we get to see him excel in Paris, or we get to see him do well in Tokyo. I asked him if he's going to run at 10,000, and Carrie said, why should he do that? And the reasoning, my thought process is there's going to be other athletes gunning for him. Speed is always part of this event, and he has shown it more than anybody. Can anybody stay with him? Not at this time, but there will be. We've seen this before. And what does this take out of you to run these incredibly fast marathons? There is a price your body pays for that. And those are some of the things that we'll be discussing in future athletics chats. But for today, this is the end of our epilogue, Athletics Chat 107. Thank you to Mike Deering, who is recording this and trying to keep me out of all the rabbit holes. Thank you to Stuart Weir for taking some time with us. And thank you to our dear viewers please pass along our athletics chats and coffee with Larry's and convos with Larry's and our various other programs, and tell people about Run Blog Run, because the more folks who watch it, the more we can bring in new sponsors. Okay. And it is sometimes I feel like a voice in the wilderness, but track and field is a global sport, and as Robert Griffin III said, it's the only sport. And I think that actually comes from Peyton Jordan back in the 70s and 80s when he was coaching, retired coaching at Stanford. But the late great Peyton was pretty big on talking about our sport too. And Robert Griffin has been doing a fantastic job. So peace out. Talk to you soon.